In my recent picture of Sir Watkin Bassett reeling beneath the blow of hearing that I wanted to marry into his family, I compared his garglings, if you remember, to the death rattle of a dying dog. I might now have been this dog's twin brother, equally stricken. For some moments I stood there, quacking feebly. Then, with a powerful effort of the will, I pulled myself together and cheesed the bird imitation. I looked at Jeeves. He looked at me. I did not speak, save with the language of the eyes, but his trained senses enabled him to read my thoughts unerringly. Thank you, Jeeves. I took the tumbler from him and lowered perhaps half an ounce of the raw spirit. Then, the dizzy spell overcome, I transferred my gaze to the aged relative, who was taking it easy in the armchair. It is pretty generally admitted, both in the Drones Club and elsewhere, that Bertram Wooster in his dealings with the opposite sex invariably shows himself a man of the nicest chivalry, what you sometimes hear described as a parfait gentil knight. It is true that at the age of 6, when the blood ran hot, I once gave my nurse a juicy one of the top knot with a porringer, but the lapse was merely a temporary one. Since then, though few men have been more sorely tried by the sex, I have never raised a hand against a woman. And I can give no better indication of my emotions at this moment than by saying that, per chevalier though I am, I came within the veriest toucher of hauling off and letting a revered aunt have it on the side of the head with a papier-mâché elephant, the only object on the mantelpiece which the fierce rush of life at Tortley Towers had left still unbroken. She, while this struggle was proceeding in my bosom, was at her chirpiest. Her breath recovered, she had begun to prattle with a carefree gaiety which cut me like a knife. It was obvious from her demeanour that, stringing along with the late Diamond, she little knew what she had done. "As nice a run," she was saying, "as I have had since the last time I was out with the Barks and Bucks. Not a check from start to finish. Good, clean British sport at its best. It was a close thing, though, Bertie. I could feel that cop's hot breath on the back of my neck. If a posse of curates hadn't popped up out of a trap and lent a willing hand at precisely the right moment, he would have got me. Well, God bless the clergy, say I. A fine body of men. But what on earth were policemen doing on the premises? Nobody ever mentioned policemen to me." "That was Constable Oates, the vigilant guardian of the peace of Tortley in the Wold," I replied, keeping a tight hold on myself, lest I should howl like a banshee and shoot up to the ceiling. Sir Watkin had stationed him in the room to watch over his belongings. He was lying in wait. I was the visitor he expected. "I'm glad you weren't the visitor he got. The situation would have been completely beyond you, my poor lamb. You would have lost your head and stood there like a stuffed wombat, to fall an easy prey. I don't mind telling you that when that man suddenly came in through the window, I myself was for a moment paralysed. Still, all's well that ends well." I shook a sombre head. "You err, my misguided old object. This is not an end, but a beginning. Pop Bassett is about to spread the dragnet." "Let him." "And when he and Constable come to search this room?" "They wouldn't do that." "They would and will. In the first place, they think the Oates helmet is here. In the second place, it is the officer's view, relayed to me by Jeeves, who had it from him first-hand as he was staunching the flow of blood, that it was I whom he pursued." Her chirpiness waned. I had expected it would. She had been beaming. She beamed no longer. Eyeing her steadily, I saw that the native hue of resolution had become sickly dull with a pale cast of thought. This is awkward." "Most." "If they find the cow creamer here, it may be a little difficult to explain." She rose and broke the elephant thoughtfully. "The great thing is," she said, "not to lose our heads. We must say to ourselves, what would Napoleon have done? He was the boy in a crisis. He knew his onions. We must do something very clever, very shrewd, which will completely baffle these bounders. Well, come on, I'm waiting for suggestions." "Mine is that you pop off without delay, taking that beastly cow with you." "Run into the search party on the stairs? Not if I know it. Have you any ideas, Jeeves?" Not at the moment, madam. Even Jeeves was somewhat perturbed. You can't produce guilty secret of Sir Watkins out of the hat as you did with Spode? No, madam. No, I suppose that's too much to ask. Then we've got to hide the thing somewhere. But where? It's the old problem, of course. The one that makes life so tough for murderers, what to do with the body. I suppose the old purloined letter stunt wouldn't work. Mrs. Travers is alluding to the well-known story by the late Edgar Allan Poe, sir, said Jeeves, seeing that I was not abreast. It deals with the theft of an important document, and the character who had secured it foiled the police by placing it in full view in a letter rack, his theory being that what is obvious is often overlooked. No doubt Mrs. Travers wishes to suggest that we deposit the object on the mantelpiece. I laughed a hollow one. Ha! Take a look at a mantelpiece. It is as bare as a wind-swept prairie. Anything placed there would stick out like a sore thumb. Yes, that's true, Aunt Dahlia was forced to admit. Put the bully thing in the suitcase, Jeeves. That's no good. They're bound to look there. Merely as a palliative, I explained. I can't stand the sight of it any longer. In with it, Jeeves. Very good, sir. A silence ensued, and it was just after Aunt Dahlia had broken it to say how about barricading the door and standing a siege that there came from the passage the sound of approaching footsteps. Here they are, I said. They seem in a hurry, said Aunt Dahlia. She was correct. These were running footsteps. Jeeves went to the door and looked out. It is Mr. Finknottle, sir. And the next moment Gussie entered, going strongly. A single glance at him was enough to reveal to the discerning eye that he had not been running just for the sake of the exercise. His spectacles were glittering in a hunted sort of way, and there was more than a touch of the fretful porpentine about his hair. "Do you mind if I hide here till the milk train goes, Bertie?" he said. "Under the bed will do. I shan't be in your way." "What's the matter?" "Or better still, the knotted sheet. That's the stuff." A snort like a minute gun showed that Aunt Dahlia was in no welcoming mood. "Get out of here, you foul spinknottle," she said curtly. "We're in conference. Bertie, if an aunt's wishes have any weight with you, you will stamp on this man with both feet and throw him out on his ear." I raised a hand. "Wait, I want to get the strength of this. Stop messing about with those sheets, Gussie, and explain. Is Spode after you again? Because if so—" "Not Spode, Sir Watkin." Aunt Dahlia snorted again, like one giving an encore in response to a popular demand. "Bertie," I raised another hand. "Oh, half a second, old ancestor. How do you mean, Sir Watkin? Why, Sir Watkin? What on earth is he chivying you for?" "He's read the notebook." "What?" "Yes." "Bertie, I am only a weak woman." I raised a third hand. This was no time for listening to aunts. "Go on, Gussie," I said dully. He took off his spectacles and wiped them with a trembling handkerchief. You could see that he was a man who had passed through the furnace. "When I left you, I went to his room. The door was ajar and I crept in, and when I got in I found that he hadn't gone to have a bath after all. He was sitting on the bed in his underwear reading the notebook. He looked up and our eyes met. You've no notion what a frightful shock it gave me." "Yes, I have. I once had a very similar experience with the Reverend Aubrey Upjohn." There was a long, dreadful pause, and then he uttered a sort of gurgling sound and rose, his face contorted. He made a leap in my direction. I pushed off. He followed. It was neck and neck down the stairs, but as we passed through the hall he stopped to get a hunting crop, and this enabled me to secure a good lead, which I— "Bertie," said Aunt Dahlia, "I am only a weak woman, but if you don't tread on this insect and throw the remains outside, I shall have to see what I can do. The most tremendous issues hanging in the balance. Our plan of action still to be decided on, every second of priceless importance, and he comes in here telling us the story of his life. Spinkbottle, you ghastly goggle-eyed piece of gorgonzola, will you hop it or will you not?" There is a compelling force about the old flesh and blood, when stirred, which generally gets her listened to. People have told me that in her hunting days she could make her wishes respected across 2 ploughed fields and a couple of spinneys. The word "not" had left her lips like a high-powered shell, and Gussie, taking it between the eyes, rose some 6 inches into the air. When he returned to terra firma, his manner was apologetic and conciliatory. "Yes, Mrs. Travers, I'm just going, Mrs. Travers. The moment we get the sheet working, Mrs. Travers, if you and Jeeves will just hold this end, Bertie." "You want them to let you down from the window with a sheet?" "Yes, Mrs. Travers. Then I can borrow Bertie's car and drive to London." "It's a long drop." "Oh, not so very, Mrs. Travers. You may break your neck." "Oh, I don't think so, Mrs. Travers." "But you may," said Aunt Dahlia. "Come on, Bertie," she said, speaking with real enthusiasm. "Hurry up. Let the man down with the sheet, can't you? What are you waiting for?" I turned to Jeeves. "Ready, Jeeves?" "Yes, sir." He coughed gently. "And perhaps if Mr. Finknottle is driving your car to London, he might take your suitcase with him and leave it at the flat." I gasped. So did Aunt Dahlia. I stared at him. Aunt Dahlia did the same. Our eyes met, and I saw in hers the same reverent awe which I have no doubt she viewed in mine. I was overcome. A moment before, I had been dully conscious that nothing could save me from the soup. Already I seemed to hear the beating of its wings. And now this. Aunt Dahlia, speaking of Napoleon, had claimed that he was pretty hot in an emergency, but I was prepared to bet that not even Napoleon could have topped this superb effort. Once more, as so often in the past, the man had rung the bell and was entitled to the cigar or coconut. "Yes, Jeeves," I said, speaking with some difficulty, "that is true. He might, mightn't he?" "Yes, sir." "You won't mind taking my suitcase, Gussie? If you're borrowing the car, I shall have to go by train. I'm leaving in the morning myself, and it's a nuisance hauling about a lot of luggage." "Of course. We'll just loose you down on the sheet and drop the suitcase after you. All set, Jeeves?" "Yes, sir." "Then upsy-daisy." I don't think I have ever assisted at a ceremony which gave such universal pleasure to all concerned. The sheet didn't split, which pleased Gussie. Nobody came to interrupt us, which pleased me. And when I dropped the suitcase, it hit Gussie on the head, which delighted Aunt Dahlia. As for Jeeves, one could see that the fellow faithful was tickled pink at having been able to cluster round and save the young master in his hour of peril. His motto is service. The stormy emotions through which I had been passing had not unnaturally left me weak, and I was glad when Aunt Dahlia, after a powerful speech in which she expressed her gratitude to our preserver in well-phrased terms, in which said that she would hop along and see what was going on in the enemy's camp. Her departure enabled me to sink into the armchair in which, had she remained, she would unquestionably have parked herself indefinitely. I flung myself on the cushioned seat and emitted a woof that came straight from the heart. "So that's that, Jeeves." "Yes, sir." "Once again your swift thinking has averted disaster as it loomed." "It is very kind of you to say so, sir." "Not kind, Jeeves. I'm merely saying what any thinking man would say. I didn't chip in while Aunt Dahlia was speaking, for I saw that she wished to have the floor, but you may take it that I was silently subscribing to every sentiment she uttered. You stand alone, Jeeves." "What size hat do you take?" "A number 8, sir." I should have thought larger, 11 or 12. I helped myself to a pot of brandy and sat rolling it round my tongue luxuriantly. It was delightful to relax after the strain and stress I'd been through. "Well, Jeeves, the going has been pretty tough, what?" "Extremely, sir." "One begins to get some idea of how the skipper of the Hesperus' little daughter must have felt. And still, I suppose these tests and trials are good for the character." "No doubt, sir." "Strengthening?" "Yes, sir." "However, I can't say I'm sorry it's all over. Enough is always enough. And it is all over, one feels. Even this sinister house can surely have no further shocks to offer." "I imagine not, sir." "No, this is the finish. Totley Towers has shot its bolt, and at long last we are sitting pretty. Gratifying, Jeeves." "Most gratifying, sir." "You bet it is. Carry on with the packing. I want to get it done and go to bed." He opened the small suitcase and I lit a cigarette and proceeded to stress the moral lesson to be learned from this ranigazoo. "Yes, Jeeves, gratifying is the word. A short while ago the air was congested with V-shaped depressions, but Now one looks north, south, east and west and descries not a single cloud on the horizon, except the fact that Gussie's wedding is still off, but that can't be helped. Well, this should certainly teach us, should it not, never to repine, never to despair, never to allow the upper lip to unstiffen, but always to remember that, no matter how dark the skies may be, the sun is shining somewhere and will eventually come smiling through. I paused. I perceived that I was not securing his attention. He was looking down with an intent, thoughtful expression on his face. "Something the matter, Jeeves?" "Sir?" "You appear preoccupied." "Yes, sir. I have just discovered that there is a policeman's helmet in this suitcase."